Hello, this is Don,
And this is Gina with Focused Healthy Family.
and this week we're sharing with you some of the best of 2023 from the Focused Healthy Family podcast.
Each day this week, we'll rebroadcast one of our favorite episodes over this past year. So be sure to tune in every day.
And also join us in 2024.
So have a happy holidays, and we'll see you in the new year. Friday, January 27th, 2012. My Aunt Michelle and I went to pick up this dog named Einstein. This dog was at the Chesterfield County Animal Shelter. The shelter contacted Border Collie Rescue, but they could not take Einstein. Border Collie Rescue said that Michelle, my aunt, would probably take him, and of course she would. My aunt thought that since my house was on the way there, she could come to my house and pick me up so we could go get Einstein. She had asked me if I wanted to come with her, and of course I would go. So on Friday, January 27, 2012, at 12 p.m., she came and picked me up. It was an hour and a half car ride. I brought stuff to do, but my aunt and I talked most of the car ride. My aunt told me that Einstein was good with people and kids, and that's all we knew about him. In the car, we heard bells ringing. We were convinced that it was doggy angels telling us that we were doing the right thing and to keep going to pick up Einstein. A woman who rescues dogs from the shelter had picked up Einstein for us, so we were driving to her house. We were following a GPS to get to the person's house, and GPS made us drive right past it. We saw a house with a lot of dog kennels with dogs inside of them, and so we figured that must be the house, and we were right. My aunt went to get Einstein while I stayed in the car. My aunt brought back Einstein, and I got to sit with him on the way home. I fed him milk bones, and he wagged his tail. It made me so happy. Einstein is the sweetest thing. He was great in the car. He got a bit curious about what was going on in the car. Other than that, he was wonderful. Me and Einstein made a lifelong bond right there in the car. He is so sweet. It is so sad to think what might have happened to him. All the possibilities just make me cry. Einstein wanted to look out the window on my side, so he just put his paws on my foot, and slowly one of his paws slid into my shoe. He loved looking out the window, watching the world go by. He was so happy. He knew it was his lucky day. On the way home, we heard the bells again. We finally figured out what it was, but I won't say what. My aunt and I took Einstein to the vet at PetSmart. He did wonderfully. Well, when the vet took him back to get one of his shots, he passed another dog in a cage, and he peed on the cage. So he likes people, but maybe not other dogs. Then we got him a collar. I picked out the best one. It had stars and paw prints on it and a little dangling bone with a star on it. Then we got him some good food. He was so skinny. Next, we got him a bone. He picked it out himself. He did not want a toy because he is afraid of them. When we went back to my house, we got there. My aunt put Einstein in her car. My aunt had to take my mom and dad's car because I can't ride in the front seat of her car. She then came inside to say hi and bye to everyone and then left with Einstein. Einstein made my day on Friday, the best day of my life, and I hope the story makes yours. I miss Einstein a lot, but I know he is in good hands now. This story was written by our 9-year-old daughter in 2012 about her journey to help rescue this dog.
Hello, this is Don
And this is Gina.
with Focused Healthy Family. Today, this is podcast number 65, and we're talking about furry angels.
Furry Angel.
Hey guys, it's Don here from Focused Healthy Family, and instead of our sponsor today, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the workshop we're doing based on this book. And we talk a lot about the book. We've talked about it in our podcast, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk by Adele Faber and Elaine Majlis. And what we were so impressed with this that we decided to do the training the training for it and begin doing workshops on it. We've been doing them now over the last couple of years and have just been amazed by the changes that we have seen happen to parents who are dealing with kids and watching it changing how they communicate with their child, but also how it changes behavior and it changes anxiety. It brings anxiety down in the house. And like I said, I've had an added bonus to it is I use the same material, the same stuff that's in here for my adult world with my profession because the concepts in this book, they give you real practical steps you can take to change how you communicate and make a difference between having a 15-minute conversation or a 1 hour battle. They tell you in here how to do that in many different ways. And so we do workshops. Uh, it's a 6 week workshop. It's a 2 hour a day workshop. But what we did is we split it into 2 days, 1 hour each day. We do it at noon Eastern time. And we have had people all over the world that have come onto the class and really neat stuff. And I'm going to play for you uh, one of the parents' testimonies on what they thought of the class. So listen and see what they said. So, starting January 9th, 2024, we're doing our next series of 6 week classes, and they're at noon on Tuesdays and Thursdays, each week for 6 weeks. And you're going to gain a lot of different skills that are very important. Plus, you'll have the opportunity to have other parents and listen to how they deal with things and what's going on for them, and literally working through examples, role playing, um, learning some good content to the book, and just having a good time too at the same time. We have a lot of fun while we do them. I hope that you can join us for this workshop. Again, it's all virtual via Zoom, and it's 6 weeks starting January 9th. You can find out more information by going to focusedhealthyfamily.com/workshops, where you're going to find out all about this wonderful workshop on how to talk so kids will listen and listen so kids will talk. Hope you join us again. focusedhealthyfamily.com/workshops. Thanks.
Don, you're leaning out of the
So,
picture
yeah.
frame again.
And today,
We're talking about the beloved pets in our life and the impact that they have on us.
and especially today, we want to dedicate this to our own furry angel.
Our dog Olive, who is 16 years old and has been in our life personally for over about 13 years, came to us at a time when our middle child was suffering severely with OCD. And she really was an angel for us.
Yes.
She had already befriended our daughter before that. She was our neighbor's dog.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, they had 3 dogs too.
and they got this puppy, and then she got pregnant to have a baby. And so our daughter would go walk Olive for them. And I mean, she was 5 or 6 at the time.
You know, she bathed him, she walked him, she played with him. They had a connection. You could tell right off the bat.
Our neighbor would
Out of those 3, Olive was the one that just had some interesting connection with Abby.
Abby would go over to visit Olive, and our neighbor would tell us that when she heard Abby's little high-pitched voice, Olive would get all excited. She's always loved kids, and even at the tender age of 16, still it gets excited by children and kittens and puppies, and she has such a mothering instinct about her, and she has blessed us over these years.
So many ways, so many ways. I mean, you know, she was dog therapy for our kids, going through some of the stuff they had to go through with OCD and the anxiety. And Olive was always there, ready to help them and pull them out of some of the worst stuff, just by being there, just by wagging that butt, not just the tail, but the butt. You know, she used to, as when the kids were still pretty small, they could knock, you know, Olive could knock them over with that wagging tail because it just got so happy that
Unfortunately, she had loose hip joints,
it.
and we later discovered when she dislocated her hip and had to take her to the vet. But this dog was so happy that she was in the backyard and probably getting excited about a cat she spotted. And we looked out and her leg is like hanging funny and she's sitting there and
No, she was standing,
standing
and that
up
one
against the
leg was just
fence.
dangling.
And other than the panting, that's the only way we knew how much pain she was in. And quite an adventure taking her to an emergency vet. And if your dog dislocates their hip, don't spend the money to have the hip relocated because it's just going to come out again. We wound up having to take her for hip surgery. And she was about 7 at that time. And she has blessed us with so many more years and so much love.
She was a protector too.
Yeah.
I like the story, but I don't like the story because it was not fun at the moment. But when Abby was pretty small too, but we had Lexi was just a baby. I was holding
She was a toddler.
Yeah, and I was holding her and walking with Abby and Olive, and a neighbor dog that was behind our house came out of nowhere and started to really come at us, and not in a friendly way, very angry, very aggressive. And it really scared me because I was trying to hold my youngest and protect Abby at the same time. And Olive steps out between us and this dog and would not let that dog near us. And she had to take some abuse because that dog chomped onto the back of her tail and was trying to drag her, pull her around, and she was going right at her. And we slowly backed up to go back to the house, and Olive just slowly backed up with us. She did not let us any space between us and the dog. She filled it, and she protected us and kept that dog at bay from us getting hurt, even though she was being chomped on. She didn't get hurt too bad, but she did have some scratches and scars from it. But it was just amazing to watch her defend us like that with such love and such care.
That was a difficult time. I was at work when this happened, and our youngest then became kind of afraid of dogs from that experience. But luckily, growing up with the dog, she kind of was able to work past that. And to this day, loves dogs as much as the rest of us. And she was 1.5 years when we adopted Olive. So Olive was our neighbor's dog, and she had been Abby's rescue. Coming to her when Abby was struggling, we would borrow her from the neighbor, and our neighbors were moving back to Florida. And what they told us was that they couldn't find a place to rent that allowed 3 dogs. And they knew how close Abby and Olive had become. And it was funny because I remember Abby had been begging us for a dog since probably she could speak. And we just kind of weren't quite ready to jump into that endeavor. We had always had cats. And I remember saying, well, if we got a dog, it would need to be a dog like Olive.
Watch what you ask for,
So they asked if we would take her. And it was quite an experience. And at the time, she was struggling a lot with her OCD. And so stepping up to care for this dog, we knew it would be a family dog. And yet the two of them have such a bond and a connection.
Yeah. And I'm getting very emotional here because we're coming to the end of Olive's life, I believe.
2 months ago, she had a near collapse, and we took her to the emergency vet, and they found a tumor on her spleen, which apparently is very common, especially in older dogs. And at her age,
well, she also has some heart issues that we found earlier.
She's been on heart medicine already, but they said that's not likely to what would take her life. But this tumor, and what happens is it bleeds, and then that causes her to become anemic. And she was also having neurologic symptoms, not able to walk straight. But our beloved vet started her on meclizine, which is just over-the-counter anti-drowsy, anti-nausea medicine that helped that. And we kept her for a while. That was back in April. And we're recording this in June of 2023. And then she was able to return. She'd been living with our daughter since our daughter moved out because she is so attached to her dog. And as well as our other rescue beagle who came into our life a number of years later. That was a whole nother story. So from the time she was 14, she was going to stay with her aunt who has this dog Teamworks dog training at Raleigh, North Carolina. And she would spend a week up there staying at her aunt's house and going into work with her. And then initially the business was operated from the house completely. And she'd been talking about, Olive's getting older and we need to get another dog because I don't want to just lose Olive. I mean, gosh, that's been 6 years ago. I don't know. It's been a long time ago. And it was winter. And this neighbor across the street from my sister kind of took in dogs, but she was able to feed them, but they lived out in pens outside.
Not the best of care,
And
unfortunately.
the story goes that a friend of hers was dying from cancer and he had this beagle that was maybe a year or two. We really don't know. And he begged her to take the beagle. And so she had the beagle and he's out there in this pen. And my sister she told the story how he would dig out from under the pen and come visit. My sister has dog agility trials on her property. And he would come over and watch.
Just watch. That was still.
So that had been happening. I'm not sure for how long. And then when Abby was up there, they went to visit her. And of course it snowed, which doesn't happen very often in North Carolina. And she's sending us pictures of this beagle in the snow who's having to live outside and begging us to take this dog in.
Right. And she had to convince me, which I'm always the tough one in this. I think that I didn't have that much resistance as far as when Olive came, because I can remember what I saw was how much the bond was with Olive. I saw how she was basically therapy for Abby when she was going through the toughest of times. Just seeing the dog would change the mode almost instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't have a tough time with that. Had a little tougher time with the beagle, but how do you get past? But Dad, it's snowing. The poor dog, and
because he was staying out in the cold, and so I was like, okay, well, we've got to make sure he gets along with Olive, and so we arranged come up there. We had Olive, and our youngest she wasn't even 2 yet, and I said, okay, we got to see how this beagle does. His name was Shiloh. He came with a name, and Olive met him and of course loved him. And I remember our youngest, she would run around in circles, and I wanted to make sure this dog could handle her energy. And he just sat there and watched her go around and round. And so my sister took Shiloh in and got his vet care and make sure he didn't have heartworm. And I don't know, maybe a month later, he came to live with us at our house.
Yeah.
And he'd not grown up with other dogs. And so Olive always, of course, wanted to play with him. And even within the past year, we had a vet come to our house to do some acupuncture treatment for actually Shiloh because he threw his back out. And
because he loves
came
to jump.
To the house and Olive wagging. And she was convinced that Olive was the newer, younger dog because of her energy and how much enthusiasm she had. And, Shiloh, we call him Eeyore. He's kind of like, oh, humpty-dumpty. Got that sad look on his face all the time.
Yeah.
And he slowed down a lot over the years because he himself is somewhere between the ages of 9 and 10.
Yeah, somewhere.
Roughly.
We don't know exactly.
Estimate his age, not knowing how old he was when we got him. So both these dogs, they rescued us.
Yeah.
They definitely rescued our kids.
And that's kind of what I wanted to kind of talk about in today's podcast is how effective animals can be for care, for getting even through anxiety and things like that. And we've now seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
And to know that they can be a real bonus to your family, to your care, all of that.
You keep leaning out of the picture,
Well,
Don. Come back.
We need a wider screen, I think, is what
we called this, furry angels, yet there are pets in our lives. We're not furry. Our son and his girlfriend adopted a bearded dragon when they first moved out on their own together. And he's recently been rehomed. They also have 3 cats now and other assorted amphibians and the like that his girlfriend falls in love with all these different creatures. And this bearded dragon was adopted by a family in Florida who just had wanted one for a long time, and they were able to build an enclosure outside for him, and they send pictures, and just, my son and his girlfriend are just so grateful for how much the people who adopted him love him, and being able to see that and see the joy that he's bringing into their life.
Well, and to think about it, the therapy it's been for me, because we grew up with pets in my family when I was a kid. I've had I had two dogs at home when I was a kid, and I had one called Trixie, and she was very much like Olive in a way. Now that when I think about it, because she was just so easygoing, so friendly, so everything, and so well behaved too. But my family handled animals differently. My mother, and I guess my dad too.
Well, they'd grown up on farms.
Yeah, so
And so
animals
dogs
were outside,
outside.
and they were just animals were just animals, and you just kind of
You took care of them, but
yeah, but real basic care, I guess, in a way. And because I can remember when I moved out of the house, I was 20, I don't know, 22, I guess, something like that. And my dog Trixie was still at home getting older. And she became real lethargic one day, or I don't know, one day, and my mom was instantly ready to take her to the vet and have her put down. And luckily, my sister, who is another dog lover, she's had all kinds of Jack Russell's is her big dog, and she's had quite a few of them. She came to the house and rescued the dog, picked it up, took it to a vet, and found out it had a abscessed tooth. They pulled the tooth, and the dog was back to being the normal, happy, loving dog. And unfortunately, my sister took her back to her house to keep her there after that, and somehow got out, and we never found Trixie. So unfortunately, it was tough to realize that. Didn't get to say goodbye, didn't even know what happened to her.
Interesting that you had this experience, because growing up, because my sister begged my parents for a dog, we got our collie, Coco, when we were living in Ohio. And it turned out my brother had severe allergies, and so Coco had to live outside. And my dad built him a cedar-lined doghouse and to keep him warm, because this is northern Ohio. And he was on a big long chain in the yard, and we moved a couple of years later to Pittsburgh, and my dad was building a fenced-in section of the yard, so we didn't have to be on the chain anymore. And unfortunately, the chain came loose, and he ran away, and we hadn't lived there very long, maybe a month or so. And he loved to run. I mean, he used to break the chain when we were and get away in Ohio, and we would go find him, because he'd have this long, thick metal chain attached
Dragging.
to him.
Anything you probably hear him going down the road.
He just loved to run. And so he got away. We were in a new house, a new place, and I remember my mom and sister, they went out searching, and they found a number of lost collies. Apparently collies love to run. And we almost even took in one of them, if I'm not mistaken. And we never know where he went, if he ran back to Ohio.
That's what I was thinking, it's probably
it was 2 hours. We had moved to Pittsburgh area.
But you hear all these stories of dogs and animals that go long distances to get back to wherever they came from. And I would imagine with my dog, it wasn't 2 hours away, it was only 20-30 minutes away, I guess, to my sister's house. So I would imagine she probably tried to get back to the house, and maybe something happened on the way. So
we don't know.
But these Olive and Shiloh have kind of helped me gain a better appreciation and better love for our dogs, and to care for, and not to have the kind of, not that it was terrible, but to have the mode that my mom would have. It's just, they were dogs. You didn't really have to do much with them, but take a little bit of care of feeding and stuff like that. And that it's more than that now. Olive is part of the family.
Very much so. when you had a heart attack, Don, which was 12 years ago, maybe. And you were in the hospital, and I was getting up at 4 a.m. Our kids were 2, 9, and 13, and I was getting up early morning because the doctor could come by as early as 6 at the hospital. And I would drive to the hospital, and I'd be there till after dinner. And we had some different family members who came to watch the kids and help out in other ways. A lot of friends stepped up. And one night I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and I don't know if my blood sugar was low and the power went out. There was just a number of factors. And I had gone downstairs. I know I had Lexi in my arms, and we were sitting on the couch, and the power was out. And I was kind of in this funky state. I didn't know whether I was in this world or not, but Olive was sitting there next to us. And so I knew that I was still in this world, and because she was there with us. And of course, nestling up to us and comforting us. And
Well, yeah, that was,
remember the power of, like I said, I was having this experience where I think my blood sugar was dropping because I nearly passed out. And with the power out, it was just pitch black, and I just felt a little bit out of it, and that she was there, that I knew that we were okay, and that I was still here in this world. And I remember that very clearly.
well, the instinct that she has whenever somebody is feeling sick or they're having troubles, anxiety, whatever it might be, she'd come up and nudge her nose up against you and let you know, hey, are you okay? And I'm right here. What can I do for you? Kind of almost that is the way I always interpret it, and she was always the one that she just loved to come and get rubbed, her head rubbed. That was one of my favorite things with her in the morning. Is she'd come, I'd kneel down with her and she just wanted me to rub her head. And then if I stopped, she'd tuck her head into my armpit and just rub and rub and rub, and she just loved that. And then of course she'd get the big sneeze afterwards,
And she's a fluffy ball of fur. It's funny. When she was rescued by her neighbors, got her mom, I guess, had been found and brought to a shelter. And I don't know if she had the puppies before she was rescued or after, but we were told that her mom was a soft-coated Wheaten Terrier. And so we always assumed that she was half soft-coated Wheaten Terrier. We called her a Sweeten Terrier because she was the sweetest thing. And about a year ago, Abby decided she wanted to do one of those DNA kits just to see what other breeds were in her. It's kind of a fun little thing. And so she invested in that, and it came back that she is 0% soft-coated Wheaten Terrier. And kind of funny.
Do you remember what it
was a mix of a lot of small dogs. Beagle was in there, and which is really funny, and just all kinds of mix of things, and it just kind of made us laugh. And
well, I always think of the story with my dad with our dog Herky. It was a Chihuahua, and it was kind of a rescue with that too. It was in a family that was not treating the dog very well. I don't remember exactly. It was somebody at work, I believe, and my dad agreed to take it in. I don't, and the thing is, I don't know how mom would have reacted. I'm really kind of surprised but anyway, so he's bringing this dog home and he has it in a box in the car seat next to him. Now, this is back very early, before there were like split bucket seats and seat belts. And so it was right next to him in the seat, and he's petting it, and the darn thing bit him while he was driving. And now I don't know if I would have just turned around at that point, but he still brought him home. We called him Hercules for short, Herky. And the dog was one that he did not like men. Mom, any girl would come up to him, he would be wagging his tail, happy and everything. I come up to him, he's he's like, okay, well. So we didn't bond real well, because the dog we had before that, Mitzi, was just a lovable little rounded. I think it might have been a beagle, tell you the truth, now I think about it. But he was kind of chubby and just kind of didn't do much. So it was a real change in pace, and to have a dog that hated you was not
Well,
enjoyable.
Don is one of four brothers and his mom and sister, and so having a dog that doesn't like men,
It was
not
not,
a good household for
and I
that.
think we ended up getting it to a elderly lady who was lived alone, and it was perfect fit. They got along very well. She sent us pictures afterwards of the two of them, and so we were able to find a loving home for her. And I think not long after that is when we got Trixie, and that dog was with us for a long time. Trixie used to go with me. I'd ride my bike and take her down. I lived in St. Louis near the Mississippi River, and I would ride my bike. I'd have her on a leash hooked to my bike, and she'd run alongside of me. And then when I got down to the lake or to the river, I would there was a big open field between the road. There was like a small highway that went along the river, but there was about probably a half a mile of land between the road and the river, and I would let her off the leash, and she knew well enough to stay within sight of me. So I always felt comfortable. And so she would roam and she'd explore and do it was a lot of fun. And I loved to sit by the river, and I thought it was really calming. And then we would play and do stuff. So it was she, like I said, she was a really good dog.
So, different pets and animals in our life. I remember, so I got cats when I moved to Charlotte. I adopted them. My sister's friend had had some litter. There were cats that had a litter of kittens, and I'd taken in these two little fuzzy creatures who
I
came to
inherited them.
who came to my life when I was just moving out on my own and before I had met Don. So I've always told him cats have been in my life longer than you. And
I don't probably
one was a calico and the other was a gray tiger stripe. And I named them Lassie and Thumper. Lassie because it was the coloring of our dog Coco, and Thumper like the rabbit. And just how special that was. I'd come home from work and I'd lay down and they'd climb all over me and they'd like untie my shoelaces for me. How playful and fun they were in my life. And so we had them when we got married and when we had kids. And goodness, Harrison was probably, how old was he? He got a fish. We went to I believe it was a New Year's Eve thing at our church, and we won. It was a betta fish. And that was like his first pet, that he had this betta fish that he took care of, and he named him Bob. And Bob did not live very long.
Oh yeah, that's true.
We had a little mini funeral when Bob passed, and he got buried in a box in our backyard.
I forgot about that. Forgot about Bob.
That was before Olive came into our life. And then, oh, this is a fun story. So Harrison was, let's see, Abby was about 4, he was about 9. Homeschooling our kids. I took them to different activities and classes, and we did a lot of other things with other families that we met with regularly, and we were involved in a book club, and so they were meeting and discussing different books. And the house we were meeting at, the woman, my friend Karen, they had taken in, there was a feral cat in the neighborhood, and twice a year would have a litter of kittens, and they would catch the kittens to get them adopted out so they didn't have an excess of cats running around. So we went to book club one week, and out on their back porch are these adorable little kittens. And I walk out there, and Harrison is sitting there with this little white kitten curled up on his lap, looking up at me, Mom, can we? And of course, I'm just a softie for this kind of stuff, but I knew I had to convince Don. We already had 2 elderly cats at home, which frustrated you because the one cat never learned to, she strayed from the litter box a lot, and it created a bit of a mess, peeing up against the wall. And it was hard to clean up, and that stink just doesn't come out easily.
No.
And it's one thing I've come to love about dogs is their pee doesn't smell nearly as bad.
It still can be messy though.
So we had to convince you.
Well, I remember the call and the 100 promises that went along with it. Yeah. Dad, I'll take care of it. I'll feed it.
Do you remember
Yeah,
how I started the conversation? I
no.
said it did something like, so this is not a dog, because I knew you would realize that was a whole lot more work. And I agreed to pick that cat up like later that day. And we went to the pet store and got a litter box and somehow convinced you. We kind of ambushed you with it.
Yeah, ambush was a good word for that.
And
Because I felt like pinned against the wall as being the the nice dad or the evil stepdad, or being, do but you got to take this, dad, and if I said no, how cruel would that be to my child? Yeah, but there were a lot of the promises, like I said, I'll take care of him, I'll feed him, I'll play with him, I'll do, all that. And I was like, I think I don't know, I guess I gave in right then and there. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, that's when we got Peanut.
and Harrison named him Peanut because before Harrison was born, we had, not knowing his gender or his sex, had called him Peanut because when we saw the first
He looked like
ultrasound, he looked like a
looked like
little
Mr.
peanut.
Peanut.
And
Well, you had, remember the Mr. Peanut
we had
little
got that for me
flexible thing.
because his
Yeah,
first ultrasound,
that's
we
true.
called him that. So he named the cat Peanut, and she was a tiny little white cat with a gray tail and some gray spots on her, and the sweetest little thing, always petite. And yet she thought the kids' feet, especially if they had socks on, were kittens. We had taken her at 6, 7 weeks away from her litter mates. And we would, in fact, Harrison wrote a speech about ambushed by a peanut, and everybody thought the speech was about allergies to peanuts, but it was walking down the stairs and she'd be waiting around the corner and she would attack their feet. And I remember Abby even saying she was afraid to come downstairs because she was just so playful and loving. And she was in our lives and of course, our other cats got some unexpected exercise when she came along, being a young kitten, and they were
The attack.
10, 11-year-old cats at the time, and they were big and fat and lazy, and she would want to play with them. And so she came into her life, and it was touching, and we had to say goodbye to her. But luckily we had her in our life when we had to say goodbye to my older cats, Lassie and Thumper.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult thing, saying goodbye to these beloved pets that come into our life, whether they're a fish or a lizard or a cat or a dog, any kind of pet that you might have. They really become a part of your family, a part of you and who you are. And, research even shows that it can lower blood pressure to be petting an animal. And I think the purr of a cat has been shown to have healing properties.
Yeah, I think we've seen that without scientific effects. We've seen it in action, to watch, like I say, a daughter with anxiety come down from it, and even myself, and it can be calming, even for me, which is difficult.
They take work and care, and so that can instill a sense of responsibility in children, having to walk the dog, feed the dog, care for the dog. They need attention, grooming. My sister used to do a wonderful thing every summer called Kids Camp, where she would invite kids to bring their dog if they, were old enough and met certain criteria. And she did a whole week-long camp on learning about dogs. And she brought in someone who did, talking about dog agility. Well, she covered that. She brought in someone who did like search and rescue with dogs. And so they brought their search and rescue dogs and played games, and the kids went and hid and the dogs found them. People who do pet therapy with dogs, some different dog sports. I can't even remember all of the different things. A photographer who photographers animals came in and showed the kids about taking pictures, and they learned all these different skills. And all the while the dogs were kind of kenneled for the most part during the camp, but then they would practice doing a little agility course with their dog. And so they did this. And then on the last day of class, the parents could come and they watched as they brought the dog through the agility course. And I remember this because I don't know if it was Abby did the camp, and then Abby and Lexi did it together. And one of them was walking Olive through the course. But Olive saw these people sitting around in a circle, and she said, the heck with this agility course. And she went and visited and had to visit with each and every single person sitting there. And that brought her more joy than anything. And so many memories, so many beautiful memories. And so she collapsed again last night and has not been able to walk and now is not eating.
Yeah.
And so fortunately, these things have happened when our daughter's been here with us. She was supposed to return home. She lives 3 hours from here, supposed to go to work this evening and has had to reach out to coworkers. You know, with a dog who's 16, you know this day is coming. And I'm grateful that she bounced back from when this first happened 2 months ago, that we've had this little extra time. And yet it's difficult. We had a rough night last night.
Yeah.
We didn't know if she was going to make it through the night. We debated going to a vet. Most of the emergency vets had long waiting lists, and she was not able to stand and just curled up in her bed. And we decided just to sit with her. Our
And
sweet daughter has been laying with her since this happened last night and right there with her. And we're going to our vet this afternoon, who luckily is a vet we've been going to for a long time
that
and
loves
Olive
Olive.
as much as we do.
She
And
wanted, she always said that she really wanted Olive. Yeah, she wanted a dog just like
well,
Olive, you know.
she always admired Abby for picking the dog she picked. And I remember her asking, "Can you pick my next dog for me?" Because
Yeah.
then we brought her Shiloh and she's like, "You have the sweetest dogs."
Yeah. Well, I think that's because of the sweetness of who she is, of who Abby is, and how she trains them and talks them and treats them with a lot of respect.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about how after we took in Olive, my sister connected us with a local dog trainer
I am.
who allowed us to we did the canine good citizen class and allowed Abby, and one of us was always there with her, but Abby was 8, 9 at the time. And Abby took Olive through the class and pretty much was the one who did it. And later, Abby volunteered for this woman and would come and help out at some different classes that she taught.
Well, and then eventually worked for her for a little bit. But she
Yeah,
actually got picked,
she
you know.
did. And before she moved up near her aunt to work for her full time. And so thinking about the different pets that have been in our lives.
Well, I was thinking about, if I think about all the pets we had in my family, we had birds both. We had a sparrow one time that we caught, you know, so we've had wild birds, we've had parakeets.
It was injured or something that you brought
I
it
don't
inside.
remember I just remember because we had it caged inside for quite a while. But we had birds, we had turtles, we had frogs, we had fish, of course dogs. We never had cats though. I probably at my old house, when at the bottom of the hill, if you dug that up right now, you'd find a regular pet cemetery, because every animal, that was where they got buried down. We had this big, huge, I think it was a maple tree, these huge leaves, and it all got buried. And so it was like a little cemetery down there of all these different types of animals that we've had. We had rabbits. I remember that too. And one of them got to my uncle's for dinner, which I will never forget. No.
Wow. Yeah, we rescued a rabbit. We were before we had kids, right? We were at a
Oh,
neighborhood
that's right.
meeting, and it was winter.
Did we call that Kinsey? Was that, am I thinking of that?
No, Curly.
Curly.
It was someone, we were in the church having the meeting, and someone left in a box this rabbit. And
Little tiny thing too.
they found him outside and were like, "Who's going to take this in?" And I just have this place in my heart for rabbits and have had a collection of miniature rabbits. And so we took him in temporarily till we found a home for him. And our cats were quite curious. And he was a little pooping machine. He would just hop, hop, hop.
Yeah, that was, I remember that with rabbits. That was the terrible part. It was just constant, trails of them,
But we found a home for him. And, I wanted one last story. So Peanut had passed, and maybe a couple months later, I was really struggling with my depression. And these little kittens showed up kind of just beyond our backyard in the neighbors. We spotted these 2 little kittens, and somehow we started feeding them. No, there were just 2 of them.
What happened? What about
I'm talking about Sunshine and Shadow.
oh, okay. I'm thinking of the outside cats. I'm sorry.
So I'm jumping ahead.
Sorry.
We we had started feeding an outside cat before
Oh, yeah.
then. That was another Abby pleading, if I pay for the cat food, can we feed this cat? And they named her Knox. She's a tuxedo. But then we'd been feeding her, and then we found these kittens, and goodness, they were probably 5 weeks old. And one of them was a little calico, which is close to my heart because my cat Lassie was just the sweetest thing. She would come when I called her. She'd follow me around like a little puppy. And it was very bonded with her. And so they would come up, we had a shed with a ramp going to it, and we'd come up and feed them and pet them when we fed them. And then there was the black tuxedo one, and we wound up calling him Shadow. And he was much more skittish and afraid, and he always looked like he had seen a ghost, and his eyes were big and round, and he was very anxious.
Green eyes too on top of it.
That's Domino.
Okay.
And
I'll stop.
trying to feed them and take care of them. And then the weather got colder, and we wound up coming to we have kind of an attachment on the side of our basement here. It's
It was called a greenhouse, but it's just a
not a
little lean-to, basically.
Yeah, it's just a enclosed area that's not insulated, but it's got concrete walls. And they were living there for a while, and I said we were fostering them, but you should have known I was not.
It was the sneaky back door way of getting
goodbye to these adorable little kittens, and it really helped heal me. I was really struggling and having a difficult time, and bringing these sweet little cats into our life, and a number of different kittens came through our yard and between our neighbors. And then the sweet Noxie, who had been feeding, who would show up and disappear for a couple months at a time, and I think she probably was having multiple litters of kittens, showed up after we'd been feeding her more regularly, and after we had taken in Sunshine and Shadow and had kittens. I still remember Abby, Mom, Knox doesn't look pregnant anymore. And there against our house in the ivy were 3 tiny little kittens that she had given birth to right next to our house. She was so trusting of us. And I remember because that day, it was May 1st, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. We were having our septic tank redug and rebuilt. And so I had to move them. I couldn't have people coming digging up our yard. And so I moved them, and she let me pick them up and brought them around to that greenhouse area in the back of our house. And we took care of her and the kittens for a long time.
They actually came in for just a slight couple of days, I think, if I remember.
In our basement, and we cared for them. And then when they were old enough, we took Knox and got her spayed. We have a wonderful clinic here in Charlotte called Stand for Animals. They have 3 locations and very low cost spay, neuter care for feral cats.
Great people too.
They call them community cats, and they're happy to, for like $25, spay, neuter, get them the rabies shot, and then you put them back out into the community. So we were able to care for these kittens, found a home for the 2. There were 2 female calicos and this little gray and white adorable kitten, who my son our son adopted him, and we had called him Gray, and they added the name Berlioz to him.
Yeah.
And so just beautiful stories of animals and how they've touched our lives and how they've helped to heal us and the impact that they have on us.
Well, if you have an animal lover in your life or somebody you know that loves animals, pass this along to them. We'd love the stories. We really would love for in our comments to be able to tell us your story and possibly how they helped you in some kind of care, help you get through some tough situation or something like that, or just a story by itself of what your animals, how they brought love into your life.
And we'll be sure to share pictures when this is posted, so you can see a picture of our beloved Olive and some of the different pets in our lives. And so that's our podcast for today. We hope you have enjoyed it. And again, like Don said, please share it with others. Please reach out and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Send us a message, a comment, give us feedback, do a review wherever you're listening to this podcast or on YouTube. And you can learn more about us and our coaching program by going to our website at focusedhealthyfamily.com. That's focused with an ED, healthyfamily.com. Check out our blogs, our other podcasts we've done. Tuesdays, we do short Tuesday Tips podcast for parents, the programs we're doing around the sandwich generation. Follow us on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram, Gina.FocusedHealthyFamily.
And Olive, you'll always be in our heart.
And remember, how you speak to your children today shapes their future and yours.